So the worst of it's right here. And that's a pretty good size hole. That's out of my hand. Once it started to go, it really went, man. Good thing is this part of my floor is gonna look real nice. I should have put some tape on my fingers because I don't really have like fingerprints anymore. So my fingers feel weird. Alrighty guys, so I figure this car's worth a whole lot more with paint on it. I decided it was worth it to go ahead and spend the time. I've got the time. I've got 1 week. I think that'll give me enough time to do a decent 20-footer paint job on this thing. I have started stripping it down quite a bit. Even taking all the trim off and everything. Some remnants of the original paint here. Somebody painted it white after that, and then somebody painted it yellow after that. So this will be the 4th paint job on this car. I'm not going to strip it down to bare metal. There's a time and place for that, but this is not that time and place. So the car is going to be 10 times better than it was. There's a few dents on the car and things like that. I'll straighten out some of them, but a lot of them I'm just going to leave. Cars can have dents, it's not a big deal. I'd rather have a dent than body filler. It's just my personal preference. So I'll leave it be for now. We'll see. I may go ahead and try and get at least some of them fairly straightened out, but I doubt that I will. Alright, so it is time to go ahead and get these floors patched up. So I went out and bought myself a floor patching kit. I got this one here off of Classic Industries. Looks like you kind of have to do some work to get the patch panels out of it. They're not really, plug and play or anything. So the worst of it's right here. And that's a pretty good size hole. That's out of my hand. The way I'm going to do this car still has a gas tank in it. The fuel lines run right down through there. I always get kind of concerned when I'm welding on these. So to be a little bit safer, what I'll probably end up doing is lap welding. Or, I may end up cold welding these panels in. I'm not sure yet. So normally whenever you do these, you lay your patch panel down that you've made, and you'll kind of fasten it to the floor with either screws or rivets, and then you'll cut both panels. That way you have a nice perfect size patch panel that you can, butt weld together. Now, if you're in a situation where that's great, a car that you're doing a full restoration on, and you've got all the gas lines out, and you don't have all the undercoating that's on this still, we're on a really tight time schedule on this car, so I'll cut out my bad stuff. I'll make a panel that's bigger than that, and then I'll put cold weld all the way from the edge where I've cut to the end of the patch panel, and then possibly even put a couple of rivets in there as well, just for good measure. Now, mind you, you wouldn't want to do that on a car you're doing a full restoration on. You wouldn't want to do that on a car you're planning on showing. If I had this car on rotisserie, everything was out of it, I'd be butt welding on these panels so that it looks nice and flush and factory. But this is the floors, not the quarter panels, not the fenders, not the doors. If you're just building a 20-footer car that's just a driver, it's the floor. Okay, if you got carpet in the car, you're not going to see it. And unless you're driving a monster truck, ain't no one going to see the underside of your floor. As long as it's good, as long as it's not going to trap moisture and rust, you'll be fine. And if you don't do the cold weld system, like say you just want to rivet it on and that's all, well then you could still lay a bead of some seam sealer. That's how they built these cars in the first place. Most all these panels are lap welded, and example here, this is a lap, where they've spot welded, one panel on top of another panel, and it's strong and it's great, and it doesn't have to be sealed up perfectly. We're not building a boat, so to each their own. All right, get your hole cut out, get your new piece made. I went ahead and pre-drilled my holes for my rivets. I decided not to use cold weld. I got this stuff here, which is a sort of an adhesive sealer. It says sealer on here somewhere, doesn't it? I could have swore it said sealer. Well, it says it can be used on tile, outdoor carpeting, will form a strong bond with metal. I don't know. Anyways, it said somewhere on here. Oh, there we go. Yeah, waterproof. The guy at the hardware store was talking this stuff up big time, saying this was the bomb and that it was great for everything. He said just don't use it on anything plastic or it'll melt the plastic. So I figure it must be pretty good stuff. A little tip for you guys. Get yourself one of these little caps. They come off of different like transmission fluid bottles and things. Hang on to these guys. They're good for a lot of stuff, and this is one of the uses for them right here. I'm gonna lay a good bead all the way around, pop our rivets in there. Now that that one's done, I'll move on and do the others. At this point, the whole car has been sanded down. I've revealed all my low spots and stuff. Most of them are fine, I'm just gonna leave it be. But like right here was a pretty bad one, pretty bad low spot, and it's nice and smooth now. You can't really tell because it's on camera. But this is all filled in with steel epoxy, not filler. It's more expensive to do it this way, but I just like doing it this way. I've had really good success with it in the past. I've used it on my truck. I've had that truck for 3 or 4 years now. I did that right when I bought it, and everything looks great still. I haven't had any problems with it. There's a lot of stuff on this car. I'm just gonna leave it be. You know, this car, I'm not going for a perfect car. As long as the paint sticks, that's really all I care about. I kind of skipped a bunch of time here. A bunch of labor went into this. I've already masked off the windows and things. I've taken all the trim off. What I've got for it is some surfacer primer I got from Summit Racing. I'm gonna do pretty much all the product on this car is gonna be from Summit Racing. This is my first time using their product. I'm really excited to see how I like it, how it turns out. The color choice I got with this car is not a factory color. I decided let's go with something that I think a lot of people are gonna like and that I think is gonna look good on this car. So what I ended up going with was Summit's bright metallic blue. I read somewhere that it would be fine to just top coat the surfacer primer, which probably isn't the right way to do it, but this thing's already got so many layers of paint on it already that the surfacer primer is going to get it all one color for me, and it'll fill in any little imperfections. It won't fill any big ones, but it's essentially like spraying a body filler on the car and just doing a nice thin layer of it. All right, this car is as prepped as it's gonna get. The day has come, we've got perfect weather for it. I've got my primer surfacer on the car, and it went okay, but I realize now that I'm gonna need to get a gun specifically just for shooting this stuff. I borrowed a 1.7 tip, and according to the instructions on this stuff, you can shoot it through a 1.4 to a 1.6. So I figured I'm great with the 1.7. You know, it'd be maybe a little bit too big, but I really need to have like a 2.0 or a 2.5 or something like that to shoot this stuff. And I was reducing it as well. I couldn't shoot it pretty much at all without reducing it. So here it is. It's not at all perfect. In this dimly lit garage, it doesn't look too bad. But overall, man, I gotta tell you, I'm pretty satisfied with it. I can't wait to see it once it's got some color. It's already 5 o'clock in the afternoon by this point. So I hope we have some good weather tomorrow. I'll come back in the morning, pray for good weather. All right, so it is the next morning. This paint has had time to cure. I can sand it now. As you guys all have seen, this is about the cheapest gun you can buy. When it's on sale at Harbor Freight, they're like $10. And really a pretty good deal. You're gonna use close to $10 just to clean the thing. If you count your time and your materials to clean it real good. It's kind of sad that's how things are, but anyways, I'm gonna shoot with that. That's a 1.4 tip, which is what was recommended by Summit. It's a little bit overcasty outside. It's kind of getting dark out, and the reason for that is we have got a huge rainstorm cell that's gonna hit us probably within the next hour. As the day has progressed, it's consistently gotten more and more humid. So right now I'm at about 81% humidity. I don't want to shoot this paint with that high of a humidity. And it's 60 degrees outside. So really not optimal for what I've got. I'll hang on, I sit tight, wait for some good weather. Time has come. We've got some good weather today. It's not too humid. It's not too cold. All right, paint is on. It came out satisfactory. It's not super consistent. There's a few spots where it's got a little bit more orange peel than others, but overall I'm really happy with it. I'm most happy with the paint color. It's not too dark, not too light. kind of a nice in between. The metal flake is nice. It's not too thick, not too thin. The car looks a whole lot different out in the sun, and of course it looks a whole lot different on camera. My first time shooting anything metallic, so there was a bit of a learning curve. This paint has been curing for almost 24 hours now. And so I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can't wet sand this a little bit and get some of that orange peel knocked down. I admit, it's got its fair share of orange peel, and so I wanna try and smooth that out a little bit, and then we'll see if we can't polish it up a little bit and just make it look a little bit better. One eternity later, I've gone over this whole car with the different grits. The front is still very orange peely. I'm just gonna have to sort of stop. I also didn't do anything below sort of this body line. Everything below that body line is still the original orange peely and stuff. I mean, people do that with sort of the same finish if they use the chip guard stuff, and so I'll just, you know, let people assume that's what that is. But for now, I'm just gonna stop. I've been sanding for days now. I should have put some tape on my fingers because I don't really have like fingerprints anymore. So my fingers feel weird. I've been sanding in my sleep. Had a dream last night. The whole dang dream long I was sanding, and I woke up this morning and I gotta do it again. It's turning out okay. It's a lot of man hours. I sure created a lot of work for myself. You learn by doing. So this has gone from a terrible orange peel nightmare paint job to below average paint job, which I'm more than happy with. I'll kind of show you guys. It's a little dark in here yet, but you can kind of get the idea. I think the buffing really kind of took some of the orange peel out. I gotta admit, I think I did a little bit too good of a job because now I'm starting to want to keep it, but I can't do that. All right, welcome back. I have this car in my other shop now, so I could start finishing it up, putting everything back together. Mostly did little piddly stuff. I cleaned up and painted the turn signal and headlight bezels. Also cleaned up and painted the grille. Started cleaning up and installing the trim and molding. From there, I replaced all of the weather stripping and installed the new taillight lenses. The heater core is leaking, definitely leaking. So I drove the car around a while back to see if it was leaking. I drove it for quite a few miles and I didn't have anything leaking. So I was like, well, maybe it's okay. So just to be extra certain, after probably 30 minutes of idling in here, I started to see some drips come down on the firewall. So unfortunately, I am gonna have to change that heater core. There's a lot of reasons to pull these heater boxes out. A lot of times your vacuum actuators will go bad and things like that, and you gotta remove this to change them. Sometimes you'll get a car that's been sitting outside for a long time, and mice and things will just pack it full of different things. And so it's good to pull them out just to clean them sometimes. I'm gonna have a lot of stuff to do to this thing. I'm gonna lubricate all this stuff up. I gotta fix where the vacuum comes in to the firewall. It was broken. I'm gonna have to get a new vacuum reservoir because it is bad as well. I know there's gonna be more. Oh, this piece here is broken. So, yep. I like to take mine out with all of the vacuum hoses. I'll just unplug this from the unit and then take my cable off the unit as well. If I can, I like to submerge these in oil. Just something that can get in there, and then you sit there and just work it back and forth, and then it'll be good to go for quite a few more years. And then I'll just check all these out. A lot of times these are still in fine shape, but it doesn't hurt to lubricate these a little bit. And then check all your different actuators. Sometimes you'll find some that are bad. These things are pretty resilient. They'll last a long time, but sometimes you'll run into some that are bad. This vacuum hose here goes through here, and then there's a piece of rubber hose that goes inside the box here. That piece is likely going to be very, very dry rotted, and is probably going to break, just like this one has. That one there is the return vacuum hose for this pod. So you can't see it right now because it's, you know, together and whatnot, but if you take this apart, you'll see that this pod has got one vacuum hose here, which goes there, which draws this door inwards. And then this other vacuum hose, which goes down inside there, goes on the other side of it. And whenever vacuum is applied on that, then it moves this door back this direction and will close it. If you have this one here broken, well, then it won't ever fully close. It'll come back to that position right there, but it won't go to there. So you want to get that fixed. You can just take this apart. All you got to do is take this piece of the box here off so that you can get it out of the way and replace this here hose. One other main thing is this little guy right here, which is what attaches the actuator to the door itself. These are made out of plastic and they break all the time. There's a little tab that should be coming off of it right here, and then the tab on this end is screwed on right there, and it always is broken. So it doesn't really quite work like it should. It'll still open this door, but it'll make extra noises and it won't close all the way. So these here you can buy. There is a sort of a fix for these now. They are made of one chunk of aluminum. So that's what I've ordered for this one. Not too bad, 17, 18 bucks or so. And it'll be good to go forever. Once you get this bracket out of the way, you can take your piece here. You can slide that dude out. That gives you full access here to your heater core. Here you can see where this one here had been leaking. And so got me a new one, and now's a great time to go ahead and clean up this whole box, lubricate anything, so that this thing is good to go for many, many years. And hopefully, nobody has to tear into this box again for a long, long time. I've got my new heater core here, so it's installed and ready to go. The only thing I'm gonna do though before is right here where there's a bit of a gap, which is going to be on all of them. There are little gaskets that are originally on these, and those gaskets are almost always going to be deteriorated and just falling apart. You can buy those, but that's not necessary. You don't have to do that. What I normally do with this is you have a product out there that most auto parts stores carry called strip caulk. This stuff is great. It's like a non-hardening caulk. It's a foot-long strip, real nice and squishy, kind of like gum. You can take yourself a strip of that and pack it in around stuff like this, and that will create a nice airtight, watertight seal to make sure that you're not losing all your airflow through stuff like this. And you can do that very same thing on spots like right here. Lay yourself a nice thin strip of it, and then whenever you put your piece on, tighten it down, it'll squish and give you a good seal. And this is kind of what the end result would be like. From here, I can put all this stuff back together, put it back in the car, and start moving on to other stuff. Now, before I put this dash back in, I want to make it look a little bit better. Things got quite a few cracks in it. New dashes on these are quite expensive, and unfortunately, kind of a big chore to replace them. I was just going to leave it all cracked up. But for the meantime, I figure, why not make this thing look a little bit better? It's still a cracked up dash. To most people, it's still trash. But it can at least look a little bit better and then be a little bit easier to clean, things like that. So, I'm not sure what the final result is going to be, but I know with most all options for trying to make these better, you always have to kind of knock down the high spots. So, I went through all the big cracks and kind of pushed them in with my finger until I hit some halfway decent vinyl, at least the stuff that hasn't kind of peeled up off of the surface. So I've got a flat surface. From there, I cleaned it out real good with a wire brush here, wire wheel, trying to give it something good to grab onto, and then just kind of flake off all the bad foam that's been sun cooked and is real loose. And you guessed the next step. Take yourself some spray foam, fill in all the gaps and things, let it cure up real good, and then take yourself a knife and shave it down to the surface level. From there, I'll show you what I'm planning on doing with this thing. Turned out better than I thought. I'm really impressed with this foam. I'm happy with how it really embedded itself into the old foam down in here, and it really got in here and kind of wrapped itself around and grabbed really good onto the dash pad. First off, I'm going to tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to wrap this in new vinyl, or new leather for that matter. It's just a matter of time before it cracks again. The dashboard is in direct sunlight a lot, and vinyl and leather just don't like being in the sun. They crack, they dry, There's not much you can do to prevent it other than not parking the vehicle outside. So the other thing I've seen people do is they will just fill the cracks and things like I've done with the foam, and then they will body filler over that, and then they will sand it all smooth. And that's still not going to last a long time. I'm going to go over the whole thing with surfacer primer. I'm going to try and put it on there without thinning it so I can go on real nice and thick with it. And I'm going to go over the whole dash pad. And some of you are going to be like, hey, isn't it going to be just smooth then? Aren't you going to not have any sort of texture like you'd have on vinyl or leather? And you'd be right, I won't. What I'm going to do for my texture, I'm going to go over the pad with a wrinkle paint. You can also go over it with hammered paint, which is a name brand thing. And that'll look great too, but I think that the wrinkle paint will look better for what I'm going for, and I think you're going to like the results. If you are cheap like me, don't try and use a party cup to mix up your paint. Otherwise, the paint will just eat a hole right through the bottom of it and you'll lose half your paint. I was kind of wondering if that might happen. I didn't figure the paint was quite that aggressive, but it is. Good thing is this part of my floor is going to look real nice. Oh boy. Once it started to go, it really went, man. That's quite a mess. Fast forward, and here is the result. I skipped a whole bunch because a lot of bad stuff happened. So I used my surfacer primer on this, and I brushed it on, and something didn't work out right. Maybe that's supposed to go through a gun only and not be brushed on. Maybe I brushed it on too thick. I don't know. Either way, it was taking a really long time to cure. There was some light coming in, direct sunlight coming in from the window, and there was one spot where that direct sunlight was hitting it and the paint was actually bubbling up off of it. So what I ended up doing was just scraping all that stuff back off, and then I went back over the whole thing with a sander. After that, I decided to use a different primer, and so after that, I shot the wrinkle paint on this. I went ahead and went with VHT. This is a high temperature paint, good for up to 350 degrees. So the way I looked at it, this is going to be in the sun a lot. It's going to have direct sunlight through the windshield. And so I figured if I'm going to put a paint on here, this paint might be halfway decent. Maybe not. I guess time will really tell with that. And I'm not going to have the car, so whoever buys this thing is going to really be the one to find out. Unless it fails immediately. It kind of ended up giving it a neat effect. It's more interesting than it is nice. It gave it a nice texture, but there's spots where I was a little bit too heavy with it, and it almost gave it this kind of like grainy sort of, I don't know. I'm not sure what to call it, but it kind of put some lines in it. They all kind of go in the same direction, so it doesn't look all that weird. One other thing I forgot to mention is the spots where there was the foam and whatnot. Normally what I would do is go over that with body filler, preferably some with fiberglass in it, to just go over those and things. That way the paint doesn't eat into the foam. What I decided to do with this one, I used Gorilla Tape. I took my time and went over all the foam spots with the Gorilla Tape, and you can obviously tell, you can see where the Gorilla Tape stops and where the rest of the dash starts. But I think, me personally, I would run it just like this on a car, but I'm not going to stop there. I picked this stuff up at Menards. Menards has a pretty large selection of rugs and carpets and fabric, things like that. So this stuff here, I got a 6x8 roll of it for $15. And it's the same stuff I used as well on the rear. So there it is. It's all done. I did reuse the original card. It was still in pretty good shape. So I got speakers on the way. I just got some cheap 6x9s. And so when they show up, I'll cut the speaker holes out of the fabric. This stuff's pretty easy to do. It's pretty simple stuff. If you know how to trace and use a pair of scissors, you can do these things. And like I said, the carpet's really cheap. I've still got lots of it left. I can still do a couple more cars with it. and for $15. Not bad at all. I'll get this thing in there and show you guys more of the final product once the whole interior is finished up. Let me know what you guys think. I was going to buy some new door cards for this car, but they're a little bit out of the budget. These ones are in pretty rough shape, but I think I can make them look at least halfway decent. The vinyl is peeling off of it, so there's really nothing really holding it. I've already grabbed it and peeled it back over, but I need to do something to keep this from peeling back off. This piece here, which goes on the very top and kind of wraps around the door, these are always cracked. It's really fragile plastic. I cleaned this up and used JB Weld, and then I also used the little leftover bits from rivets to add some structure to it and ran them this direction through here. You can kind of see one right there. Really the best way to do this would be to actually get new vinyl. I'm not gonna do that. This vinyl is good enough for me. It's not got any big rips in it or nothing, so it's just shrinking and it's not staying glued. And the card is not in great shape either. You know, no glue is going to hold this on there. So that's where good old Gorilla Tape comes in. Now I know what you're saying. This is kind of a hack. And it is. It's just going to make sure this stays put. And so I'll run on a line of it on the bottom, fold it over so that it stays attached to the card. And I'll do that in all the spots where it's really bad. Once all the tape's on there, it looks something like this. I run strips this direction, and then I use that tape to pull tight on the vinyl and then stick the tape down, and then to ensure that that tape doesn't peel off, I take a strip, run it this way to tie this up to here, and then I run one more strip along right here to really make sure that stays put. I do that along all the nice long flat spots, and then kind of do something similar here on the corners. This is what it looks like on the other side. You have just a thin strip of it around the outside there. This one over here is almost done. This one here is the passenger side one. You can see I kind of cleaned it up a little bit. I kind of just lightly misted some satin black paint back on here just to fill in the blotchiness. Once you paint it too, you can't see as well where the Gorilla Tape is. Like here's a piece right here. And so, you know, doesn't look great, but it sure as heck looks better than not having anything on the door at all. This piece here, there's a few spots where the rivets were broken out of it, so it was nice and loose. So I went ahead and just drilled some new holes, put new rivets in. So that's riveted back on now. With how bad it was on the corners, I thought this was gonna look absolutely horrible, but I think it's gonna look okay. At this point, there were only a few mechanical items left that needed done on this car. So I repacked the front wheel bearings and of course torqued them. I then replaced the transmission output shaft seal. I also replaced the body mount bushings with this kit from Energy Suspension, which came with the bolts, washers, bushings, and I definitely needed all of them. The car ran great at this point, except it would not consistently run smooth at part throttle. So I looked down the carburetor and saw that it had this open style carburetor adapter, which is not the correct adapter for this application. To adapt a square bore carburetor to a factory original GM spread bore intake, you typically have to use a tapered 4-hole adapter specifically for adapting square bore carbs to spread bore intakes. With an open adapter, the signal to the carburetor will be erratic at part throttle, causing running and distribution issues. The exception to this would be if you have an aftermarket spread bore intake where it doesn't have the 4 individual holes like these OEM ones do. Another exception to this would be if you were trying to use an open adapter to adapt a spread bore carb onto a square bore intake manifold, assuming that your square bore intake didn't have 4 individual holes. Anyways, that's enough about carburetor adapters. Now that this car is all done, it's time to have a little bit of fun with it.
That's gonna do it for this one, guys. I hope you've had as much fun watching it as I've had fun doing it. And if you guys like seeing stuff like this, well, buckle up, because I've got a whole lot more of them to do. And God willing, I'd like to keep doing this for a long time. So, if you like this stuff, please subscribe. I could really appreciate that. It's time for me to move on to the next one, and you can see that on a future episode.